So energy, obviously, you're very aware that energy is all around us. It comes in many forms and shapes and frequencies and so forth. So it's very, very around. And matter of fact, I was telling Howard this morning, last night I was in bed laying down on my back. And I've seen pictures, of doing the meditation with your legs crossed and your hands out like this. And so I was just laying with my palms down on my legs, kind of observing. And then I opened them up, and I felt energy. I was like, okay, close them. Back up, more energy. And then I did this. I closed the circuit. And oh my God. The energy that I felt was just like, I can't believe this. And so now today, during my break, I went home and got a book on Buddhism. All right, so I'm very curious. I always like to learn. There we go, the battery must be low. So this chart shows you frequencies. From the longer wavelengths to the very shorter wavelengths, and starting over here on the left with the longer wavelengths are the broadcast TV bands. So that'd be like the old days of the UHF and VHF. The TV would broadcast the TV channels. You'd have to sit there, no remote control. You'd get up, turn the channel. But the TV waves would go across the land very far. Then we start getting to the radio frequencies, the radar, the microwaves, and the infrared. So all of these are frequencies that are bombarding us. And I actually bought a meter that measures EF, EMF, and RF frequencies. And it'll tell you what's in this area. It's like, whoa, you get a lot of RF. And I'm going, okay, let's move this electronics thing further away from my body, and so forth. So all these frequencies you cannot see, but they're all around us. And then you have this little narrow band. So this is visible light, and starts off on the lower frequencies of the red, and 700 nanometers. That's dealing with the wavelength of how short the red frequency or the red light is, all the way up to the magenta and so forth. On both sides, you have infrared and then ultraviolet. Ultraviolet would be like if you go to a concert or whatever, and you see the black light or the really deep blue and so forth. That is usually ultraviolet light, and it's just on the visible side of the spectrum, just right there. So, mentioned being a photographer, learned about infrared photography, and so I was very curious. I actually took one of my cameras, sent it off to Washington, and they did a conversion so that on all of our cameras, they actually have a sensor that blocks the infrared light and takes pictures of all the visible light. So if that infrared filter was not there, when you take a picture with your DSLR or phone, then it would be very red, because the camera sensor can pick up infrared light, but it has to have that sensor to block the infrared portion so it doesn't contaminate your picture. Well, with this infrared conversion, now my camera cannot see visible light, but it just sees the infrared light that is reflected off of objects. All right? So for example, here, all the trees and foliage and grass and so forth reflect the infrared lights. And things like the water, or the ground, stones, absorb the infrared light. So when you take a picture, when you look on the back, it becomes black and white, and you see this immediately. And I just became enthralled, and for like 10, 15 years, I've walked around with a color camera and an infrared camera. I just like, oh, boom, boom, boom. That's down in Portugal. Batteries must be weak. Lincoln State Park. That actually won an award at the State Fair. Anybody know where that is? If you don't, you need to visit this. West Baden.
West Baden.
Yeah. Considered the 8th wonder of the world back when it was built. Because at the time, it was the largest freestanding dome. It's 200-foot diameter across. And they actually hired a bridge architect from Cincinnati to come in and build it, because people said, you can't span a freestanding roof that far. And he goes, yeah, watch this. French Quarter, New Orleans. Okay, so now we do a different frequency area. This is the audible frequency range. And at birth, most people can hear 20 hertz up to 20,000 hertz. So that'd be 20 hertz would be like the extremely bass frequencies. You go to a concert, you feel the sound waves coming through your body and so forth. Matter of fact, these frequencies are so low, and the wavelength, which we'll talk about later, is so large. I mean, it could probably be from here to that wall, that no wall can trap or stop the low frequency sounds. That's why when you hear a car going down the road and you hear a boom, 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 but you don't hear any of the high frequencies, that long wavelength just goes right through walls, through cars. It can't be stopped unless you're in a recording studio and you actually know how to trap the frequencies by getting a wall and absorption materials to cancel it and so forth. The high frequencies, however, they could be short wavelengths like this long and so forth. So this glass and cars is enough to actually stop the high frequencies. That's why you don't hear the high frequencies of the car if the windows are rolled up.
Mackenzie, do we have any batteries?
No, we're good, we're good. Oh yeah, so let me pass out these. So these are audio speakers that you are going to hear some of the sounds from. So I'll put one over here.
You need your AAA or double batteries.
Oh, we're good, we're good. Put one over here. So, Howard and I talked about this morning, Chladni plate. There was a German physicist that was talking about how a device is able to perceive the sound waves that we cannot see. And he basically took a metal plate, and in this video example, they had an audio speaker in that box below, which creates the low frequency or the frequency sound generated from the keyboard. And then that plate is attached with a rod to the speaker. So as the speaker sound vibrates, the plate vibrates. Then, if you take salt and put it on this plate, the salt pattern will change according to the audio frequencies. So here's just a quick example.
The first experiment for the Cymatics music video is called a Chladni plate.
So, having seen that, upper right, there's an app, and I showed Howard that. It's a $2 app for iPhone. I'm not sure if it's available for that, but it actually will measure, this is just an example. Pulling my phone out. So it uses the microphone on the speaker, and as you're playing notes, it picks up the sound and then creates a certain pattern according to that. So I just had to have that for $2. All right, sound waves. On the left is a somewhat complex sound wave where you have multiple peaks in there. That could be for like a distorted or harmonic sound. But sound itself in its purest form is a sinusoidal waveform. So the first harmonic, or the bass note, like I just played, will have two nodes. The nodes are the beginning and the end, and then the antinode is the positive and negative swing of the sound wave. So if you imagine like a guitar, you have the guitar string anchored at 2 points, the neck and the bass. So if you pluck that string, what does that string do? It creates the fundamental note of that particular note. All right? So in order to make or to describe that note as a frequency, you have to have a positive and a negative part. So 3 nodes, 2 antinodes, just creating a simple sine wave. That length of that note is called the wavelength. So with like the bass frequency we talked about earlier, the bass frequencies could have a wavelength of like 20 feet. So for this note, right, this bowl has a wavelength of 4 feet. So if you were to, if this closed off the room, and if I were to strike that, you might be able to hear that or feel that through the walls. So the first harmonic has 2 nodal points and an antinode. The second harmonic, when you start getting more complex undulations or timbre, on the sound has 3 antinodes, or 3 nodes, and 2 antinodes. And then you can guess it, third harmonic, and so forth. So that's kind of how the sound goes from simple and builds up to create a harmonics of it. So this beautiful guy. Supposedly, I've been reading that it has a resonant frequency of 7.5 or 8 hertz. So imagine how long of a wavelength the Earth, when it talks and speaks and vibrates, how long that wavelength might be. And that's pretty cool. So when I started doing research for crystal bowls, singing bowls, I found out there's usually 2 sets that you can buy. You can buy a set that is tuned to 440 hertz. And if you are a musician, you know that tuning, orchestras and bands, they always use a 440 as their tuning note. So if you want to play your bowls with other musicians, I recommend you get a 440 hertz bowl set. I don't, because once I found out about why they changed to 440, which we'll get into, I wanted to go to the 432 hertz. So let's talk about that. So back in the day, when Mozart was at the piano and other composers, they would compose a song, and they could pick whatever scale, like the monks, they usually use like 6 notes or so. You have mixolydian and all that stuff. I failed math or the music theory side, don't ask me. But they could pick scales, and tuning depends on their instruments of how they want it to. So what you're going to hear audio-wise first is 440 hertz tone. I'll pause. And then you're going to hear 432. All right, so just listen to them. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so then we'll go to that. So in 1939, the orchestras got tired of tuning to different frequencies and tones and so forth. So what they kind of did is they standardized the tuning to be 440 as the standard tuning note, which now that I understand that is like, well, that is not really a pleasing tone to be thing. I actually like the 432 hertz, and you'll hear other frequencies earlier. So now here is the 440. That's the tuning note. Here's 432. Did you notice the difference? Which one was higher? First or second? First one was higher. First one was higher. Yep. Listen to them again, listen now. Form an opinion. Which one do you like better? Now that I understand, the 440 hertz sounds distorted, kind of edgy, and the 432.
The first one sounded like that alarm that goes off Friday at 11. Is it the same hertz?
No, I don't know. So those are very distorted.
Yeah.
So forth. Yeah.
From a lot of distance.
Exactly.
Sounds like a PA.
So
Yeah.
there's several different chakras out there and frequencies that are stated. So this is the setup for the bowls that I use. If you look at the top right, you see the frequencies of the note. So you have C note, which is 256 hertz. And as I mentioned, the wavelength is about 4 feet. D. Oh, my bad. E. And if you're a musician, you're just like, do, re, mi, fa, sol. Come on, play that high note! I had to buy another 8th bowl set in order to complete the note.
Oh.
So, and actually, the tuning of this one, we'll get into it when we talk about solfeggio frequencies and so forth. Any idea why they chose the colors of the bowls?
The rainbow?
rainbow, but more specifically with frequency,
Spectrum.
spectrum of light. Red color was the lowest frequency, magenta was the highest frequency. So my red bowl is the lowest frequency, my magenta bowl is the highest frequency. My theory, anyways. Oh, and the other thing, look at numbers. I'm a big numbers guy. So, let's see. Is it this one? No. Okay, so the difference between the C note and the D note is 32 hertz. The next one's 32 hertz. 32, 32. Between G and A is 48, 48. And the other one's 46 because this bowl was a different, wasn't part of the original set. So I like numbers. That's kind of cool that they're very similar. Then I started hearing about solfeggio, or I think I'm pronouncing that right, tuning, which has a different set of frequencies. It's still considered part of the chakras, it's just different frequencies in there. It just kind of gives you an example of that. And number 5 is my lucky number. Probably doesn't have anything to do with the fact that Speed Racer was my favorite TV show as a kid. All right. Matter of fact, being a numbers guy, I got married on 10/10/10 at 1:23 p.m. You think I'm going to forget my anniversary? All right. So, solfeggio frequencies. What do you see about these 3 frequencies?
Same numbers, just in different order.
Exactly. Your root chakra, 396. Your heart chakra, 639. Crown, 963. It's said that these 3 frequencies are like the God frequency numbers and so forth. Then, along with the solfeggio frequencies, the next set up, the next is the sacral chakra. These are 471 or 147 numbers. So it's the same combination, just in 3 different ways. And then the last set, 258. So interesting. All right, resonant frequencies. The bowls that you heard are pretty pure in tones, okay? As opposed to if I play a electric guitar sound and so forth, so that would be distorted. And you'd have the root note, but then you and all that extra note is the extra harmonics that are being added to the note. Even a grand piano, if you play the middle note, C or whatever, it's going to be pure, but then you're also going to hear the overtones of it resonating, and also the note resonating its neighboring, frequencies of piano strings and so forth. So standing waves, this is kind of fascinating. Open air column. So if you have like a tube and you resonate that tube, it's going to have a standing wave, and then the blue represents, remember the sine wave? So an audio frequency has a beginning, crest, trough, back to the beginning. So on an open air column system, the antinode of the peak volume is at the end of the columns, both front and back. So the first harmonic is you see that wavelength. The second harmonic, there is the 3 antinodes and 3 nodes, 2 antinodes, and third harmonic. Wind chimes. So that's how these are making the pitch. They're a certain length. You're creating a disturbance against them, and then they're disturbing the air that's inside the tube and around it, and it creates the sound. This I found fascinating. I did not know this. So if you take a bowl, which is a closed air column, so the bowl, obviously doesn't have an open end. You get the bottom of it and then the opening of the mouth. So the harmonic or the node of the bowl is at the base, and then the opening or the peak of the amplitude is at the mouth. So, and for those that are keenly aware, this one. So the third harmonic of an open air column looks like that, but the third harmonic of a closed end is different. And why is that? Oh, we'll talk about that. It's because on a bowl, the sound from the base to the opening mouth is only 1/4 of the wavelength, as opposed to the tubes, which is half of the wavelength. So in order to create the bowl, as I resonate the bowl, like I said, 4-foot wavelength, you're going to hear the sound in various different frequencies as it goes up and out and around and so forth. And the other thing that I thought was very fascinating is bowls can only produce odd harmonics, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. They cannot produce even harmonics. I was like, blown. It's because of the way the bowl is. It's closed and it resonates at the top. So actually, let's talk about how do you play the bowls. So when you get a set, it usually comes with a suede mallet, and you can grab it whichever way feels good to you, but you want to have a good firm grip. And then you also need to have flexibility in your wrist. So let's do the root over here. Did anyone hear that sound? That's from the suede. Here's a mallet that is made out of glass and silicone. Different, isn't it? It's called timbre and so forth. So depending on how the musician wants to make the sound, and then this is a rubber mallet. Thing that I find interesting is if I were to take this mallet and strike the bowl, not very loud, is it? The bowl is at absolute rest. It's not creating any frequency. If I sing the bowl first, so there's different techniques. I've seen people where they strike it swirl. I like to swirl and just kind of let the notes kind of creep up and just slightly overtake and so forth. So there's that technique. And then, back to the recordings. So at the recording workshop, we used to teach the difference between audio CDs, and that's back in the 80s when they started becoming popular. And a true audiophile would say, oh, give me a record any day. This music sounds pure. Listen to the same song on a CD. Why is that? Harmonics. The record player produces more odd harmonics, which are pleasing. The CD player produces more even harmonics. Same song, digital, analog.
Is that why record players are coming back?
Yes. Yep.
I have one.
Yeah. All right, so my recording setup, like I said, I'm technical. Here we go. So on my laptop, I have a what they call digital audio workstation. So it allows me to bring in, and as a matter of fact, let's see, did that shut off? No. DJI flute. Live recording. Okay. Channel 12 over there, you see gray bars, meters going up and so forth. All right, now I've got that muted because I don't want the microphones from this recorder going back to the speakers. I just want to have pure sound of recording the bowls. Oh, speaking of recording, I am going to make sure your phones are on silent, please, because I'm going to record this session, and then I'm going to make it digitally available to everybody. All right, and then now what you see on this digital audio workstation is the actual notes and what I've already recorded. So at home, it used to be when I started out in the songs that Megan heard, it was just my bowls. Then I added the wind chimes. Then I added the rain stick. And I kept going and going and going. Now I have a keyboard down here. So I can play a virtual instrument on the keyboard as I'm singing bowls and so forth. So, when you're actually getting to the sound bath, I encourage you just to, deep breathing, and you're gonna hear ocean waves. So just relax your breathing and just kind of get your body in tempo with what you're hearing. And then later on, I'll play the rain stick, and I'll do it slow enough so that you kind of breathe in and out, and then breathe in and out. So what you're seeing there is stuff I've already recorded for you guys, so I'm going to be able to augment and go on from there. So I think, yep, that's it. All right, so I'm going to shut off the projector.